Welcome to the Science of Tree Felling series.
In this video, we're finally in the woods. Now, if you haven't watched the earlier videos about the tree felling plan and the preparation necessary before we even get out in the woods, I suggest you review those videos first. Now that we're finally out in the woods, we are going to go through our plan, make sure that all parts are valid before we continue, and then we're actually going to fell a tree. I'm going to give you a little bit of first-person Sawyer view today, as well as the full tree fell. So let's go check out what we're dealing with. Okay, here we are at the site of the tree we intend on felling. As I approach the site, I am looking and already starting to think about my tree felling plan. My tree felling plan is going to begin with hazards and obstacles. So the tree that we're working with today is a dead ash tree. You can see that right there next to the saw with the pink ribbon around it. As I'm approaching the tree, I'm thinking to myself and looking around, what type of hazards and obstacles do I have to overcome? Remember, hazards are things that can cause me harm, and obstacles are things that I can cause harm to. So we'll just take a look around here and see what we're dealing with in this situation. So we're dealing with a dead ash tree, which means that there's likely some of those branches up there are not very well attached. You can see the discoloration and the shedding of bark towards the top. So this tree's been dead a little while. So that's one hazard that I'm going to consider. Any of those branches break out and bonk me in the head, it's going to make for an unpleasant day. Lots of trip hazards down here on the ground. After all, I am in the woods. We're going to get all that stuff cleaned up before we get too far along, especially as it pertains to our retreat path. But being cognizant of that as a hazard as well. Lots of other things out here from a previous tree removal, an old tree fort by the looks of it, still the remnants of that, and a previously down-felled tree. All of these things could cause harm to me if the tree falls and hits any of this debris and ricochets back at me. That's something I'm going to be cognizant of. Now, obstacles, things I don't want to harm. Let's just step back one moment. One thing that I always look for that has to be first in mind, being in an urban or suburban environment, is electrical wires. Now, I'm in the woods, so as far as hazards go, I don't see any electrical wires. There shouldn't be. There's farm fields surrounding me on both sides, so no electrical hazards here, but something we always want to concern ourselves with. Make sure that we look around and look for them, actively look for electrical wires, because they can be in some sneaky spots and we don't want to learn that they're there after we have fallen the tree on them. All right, so now obstacles. Because we're in the woods, there aren't many obstacles or things that we want to avoid harming. In an urban or suburban environment, there's going to be so many of these things: houses, fences, bird feeders, bird baths, all kinds of yard art. These are all things that we want to either try to pick up and move in advance, or if we can't move them, make sure that we fell in an area that will decrease the likelihood of us striking them. Now, one obstacle I do have out here is my ATV located over there. I do not want to hit that, and that's why I parked it behind this series of trees and about a tree's length away. Just in case anything crazy happens. I know that there's an obstacle that I don't want to hit, and I've placed that as far away as humanly possible. All right, next step. I'm going to come in and take a look at this tree a little closer. Let's see if there's anything alarming here at the tree itself. We've got a good flare. We've got no hollows or cavities in the trunk. Looks like before it died, it was pretty sound. Some debris that we'll clean up here in a little bit. Making sure that we're going all the way around this tree so that we don't get any surprises. This is looking pretty good from all directions. Again, minus the debris that has to be cleaned up here real quick. Now, while I'm at the trunk of the tree, I'm going to be looking for my target. Where do I want to put this thing? And as I'm standing at the tree, just going to kind of quickly glance around and think to myself, where is the best place to set this tree down? I want to have a big open area. The less things that are going to interfere its ability to hit the ground, the better. I don't want it to get hung up in an adjacent tree. I certainly don't want it to hit the ATV. If I can avoid any of these debris piles, that's ideal too. I don't want to hit any of that stuff and have it ricochet back towards me. Based on what I'm seeing here, I am going to try to fell in this direction. I'm going to try to go between that debris pile and that aspen tree right there. So I'm going to place my target somewhere in between here. Now, before we head over there, I'm just going to take a quick gander at my tree and take myself a measurement for the plan as we enact it. We need to know how big this tree is. So let's take a close-up of the tree, knowing, and again, if you recall my previous videos about having built-in measuring tools, I'm just going to go up to this tree and take a little look-ski with my built-in measuring tools and get myself an estimate. If I had a guess, I would say that this tree ate maybe 12 inches in diameter at about breast height, 4.5 feet off the ground. I have a tape measure on me. Let's see how good and accurate I am. I'm coming in at, oh my goodness, look at that. 12 on the dot. Well, not really. 11.9. Reading 11.9 inches in diameter. All right, so I got about a 12-inch diameter tree. That's great because that's going to make my math easy. Now I know that I want to walk out to my target and find the height of the tree. Now, to find the height of the tree, you're going to want to find a straight stick. We've talked about this in a previous video, and please do review that if you're unfamiliar with what it is that I'm going to be talking about next. I want to walk out towards my target. This is going to do a couple of different things for me. I'm going to look at my lay here, see and walk the lay and see if there's any hidden obstacles or hazards that I should be made aware of. Now, this is especially going to be true to timber production. If you have something that's going to damage that tree on the way down, possibly split it or crack it in half, you're going to lose timber value. And that's something that you're only going to be able to tell if you actually walk the path that the tree is going to fall. And we need to walk the path anyhow for our target to decide how tall this tree is. So as I'm walking to my target, I'm looking, I'm seeing, hey, I want this tree on my left and I want this debris pile on my right, and I want to put this right down the center. I'm going to take a straight stick, or in this particular case, I'm going to use this snow pin because it's very straight and it's a little bit easier for the camera to see. And I'm going to use that similar triangle theorem that we talked about earlier in the video to get myself a tree height here. It looks like I'm going to be beyond this brush pile by a fair amount. I'm going to estimate the rest of the top of this instead of walking through this brush pile because it's pretty thick, but it's likely that the top is going to hit this brush pile. Now, as I'm looking back towards this tree, I'm looking at the canopies here. I got a very nice oak to my right. I don't want to hit that, but if I fell in this direction, I shouldn't have any interference with the canopy. Now, what I can do from here is a couple of things. I'm going to be able to figure out the height of the tree, and then I'm going to look at my lean as well. So again, we talked about lean in that previous video and how to figure that out. I'm going to take my right hand and place it all the way to the right of the canopy of the tree, my left hand to the leftmost portion of the canopy. Put those hands together and draw a plumb line straight down to the tree. I'm just slightly to the right as I'm looking to that tree. And by just slightly, I mean a couple of inches to the right. So the tree has a slight lean to the right, and I'm going to have to counteract that measure if I want it to hit my target. So I'm going to put this snow pin into the ground to mark exactly where I want this tree to go. I'm going to use my similar triangle theorem here to estimate the height. So as I walk back, I can see that there is approximately 15 feet on top of the stick, plus whatever the height is from my location forward. So I'm going to put my target in the ground, and I'm going to pace it on back. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. I got 55 feet back to the trunk. 55 feet plus the 15 feet on top of it that I wasn't able to get all the way to the overall height of that tree gives me a 70-foot height, right? 55, 60, 70. Yep. 70 feet. All right, so I got a 70-foot tall tree, and I have a slight lean to my right as I look to it. Next thing I need to know is the lean front back. So I'm going to go 90 degrees to the direction of my target. And it doesn't matter whether you go right or left, but in this case, right is open, left is debris filled. It's very important that when you take leans, that you take them at perpendicular angles. So the only way you can determine right-left lean of a tree is when you're staring down either at your target or 180 degrees from your target. So choose the best option to be able to see the canopy. Same thing when you're choosing and figuring out right-left lean, you have to be exactly perpendicular to the target and the tree. So I'm going to go 90 degrees from my tree and my target and calculate side lean. There's my target, 90 degrees. Get as far away as I can so that I can see the upper canopy and measure again. All the way to the right, all the way to the left, fingers in the middle, plumb line down. I'm just about centered on the tree, a little bit to the front, so that is good. Now, that being said, one thing that you may have noticed while I was panning around the camera here, we have some wind to contend with today. It's about a 17-mile-an-hour wind, and according to our target, it is not going to be in our favor. So I'll just let you look at the canopy here for a little while. See if you can get a shot of the movement that's going on up there. So we have a slight front lean, which is good. If we had a slight back lean, I'd certainly be more concerned, but the wind is going to give us a slight back lean because the force of the wind is going to constantly be pushing the tree in the opposite direction I want it to fell. So I'm going to have to be very considerate of that and maybe play the wind a little bit. Now, at this point in time, if the wind is too great, my plan would no longer be valid, right? So I would say, nope, can't do it today. I'm going to have to come back on a less windy day. I don't think that's the case. 17-mile-an-hour wind in the opposite direction, willing to risk it. Pretty low repercussions out here, even if something crazy does happen. Plus, it'll make for a good video. So we will continue on with our plan. All right, segmentation and wedge calculation is extremely important, and you should always have this factored before you move on. I know that this tree has just a slight front lean, and by slight I mean a couple of inches, but I also have the wind working against me. So from a felling standpoint, I need to go and bring the center of gravity of this tree up over my hinge and towards my target before gravity will take hold and drive this tree to the ground. How do I ensure that? Now, if it's got a front-leaning tree, if I have a front-leaning tree, which this one is, and it's a calm day and there's no force acting upon it, when I cut it and I leave just the hinge, it should go over in the direction of the target. If I have wind or a back lean, I'm going to have to make sure that I have a driving force that is going to ensure that the tree comes up over center. Now, we covered this in a previous video, but I'm going to just go over real quickly how I'm going to calculate segmentation of tree. So here, I measured earlier that the tree diameter is 12 inches in diameter. So that here is 12 inches in diameter. I have a 70-foot tall tree. if I have one wedge with a shoulder width of 1 inch, if I drive that wedge all the way into the shoulder, into the back of that tree, I will move the top of this canopy 70 inches forward. Now, I said I have a slight front lean, but I have wind to contend with. That means that I am going to use my one wedge to ensure that that kerf doesn't close and that the tree doesn't blow over backwards when I make my release cut. And if the wind is pushing against me, I will be able to drive the tree 70 inches forward with that one wedge, easily overcoming any of the back lean that the wind may create. So this should be a fairly easy tree. On my belt right now, I have 3 wedges. Now, remember, my wedge rule is always whatever I calculate. If I say I need 1 wedge, I'm always going to make sure I have 2 wedges because this is forestry math. We're doing a lot of rounding and have some assumptions in the game. So I'm going to have at least 2 wedges on me. I've got 3 wedges. Again, my plan is still valid. All right, let's take a look at what type of cutting we're going to do here. Now, as I look at this tree, it's a little non-synchronous, so it's not exactly circular. It's kind of got an odd shape and form to it. My cut plan is going to be making a face notch fairly low on the tree so I can grab as much meat as I can, especially with the size of my bar. I want to make sure that I'll be able to bore through it. So I'm going to make my face cut at about 70 degrees. Remember from that previous video I said 70 degrees is just grabbing the saw in the corner of the front handle. That's going to give you 70 degrees. I am going to take my aim at my target. Now remember I said as I'm looking at my target, the tree is leaning just a couple of inches to the left. So if I want to hit my target, I have to offset and aim at my target a couple of inches to the right to compensate for its lean. So I'm going to use my felling sights, get positioned after we're all cleaned up here, and I'm going to put a 70-degree face cut starting with the top down, and I'm going to drive the chainsaw into the tree using my felling sights on my saw, aiming 2 inches to the right. Once I'm locked into the kerf, I will reposition myself to a good ergonomic stance and continue driving down into the tree. I want to open up the face of this tree about 80%. So I'm going to look for about a 10-inch face on a 12-inch diameter tree, and then I can make my bottom cut. I make my top cut first, again, because I said in the earlier video that when you make your top cut first, it gives you a little window, a hole to look through, so that when you're making that bottom cut and you see the nose of the chainsaw come around, you can look through that window, that kerf that you made, know that it's there, and stop cutting so that you don't bypass your top and bottom cuts. So I'm going to make that cut flat because we're on flat terrain and we want our bottom cut to be parallel to the terrain. And I'm going to have that face opened up again about 10 inches. Once I have all of that set up, I need to decide how I'm going to make my back cut. Now, my back cut and retreat path is kind of going to go hand in hand here. I would like to finish and be going that direction with my retreat path. Ideally, I'd go this way just because this is the side of the tree that I prefer to work on. But again, it's only a couple of inches, so I'm going to choose my personal preference to be on this side of the tree as I'm working it. But if I need to come around with wedges and wedge this tree over, I want to be standing on that side. So remember, good side, bad side. If the tree is leaning slightly, and it's leaning slightly that direction, that's not ideally where I want to be, because if all else fails, gravity will always take control and the tree will fail in the direction that it's leaning. So the bad side of the tree is that direction. Again, ideally I'd go this direction, I'd be standing on this side, but there's a lot of debris over here, a lot of work, and there's plenty of good trees to get behind here as guards for me once that time comes. So my retreat path is going to be easier to clean up. going that direction. So I'm going to bore into the tree, and that's going to be especially important today on this windy day. So I have my face. I'm going to bore into the tree, and I'm going to remove all that tension and compression wood in the center and leave a back strap just on the back quarter of the tree so that the tree's stabilized between the hinge that I've established and the released wood that I've set in the
In
back.
accordance to my plan, because the tree is 12 inches in diameter, I want to establish my hinge wood and my release wood at about 10% the overall diameter. So I'm looking for about 1.2 or 1 inches at the hinge and the release wood.
I'm going to drive a wedge in. Should just take one. Remember, I can get that 70 inches of forward movement just with that one wedge based on the segmentation of this tree. And then I'm going to drive that wedge in, seat it, and my plan will be to escape or retreat 45 degrees opposite of the direction of my fell. There's a very nice, easy clearing this direction, and I really only need to get about 15, 20 feet away from this tree. In the time it starts to move, shouldn't be any problem. There's a couple of nice little trees here for protection. And I'm going to work my way over to that oak and get behind that oak and watch it from there. So that'll be my plan. I'll get my wedge set. I'll make my release cut, and hopefully the tree will go by gravity with a slight forward lean that it has. If the wind is pushing it back, I'm going to wait for it. I'm going to watch it. If it sits on that wedge and doesn't move, I'm going to come back in and drive this thing over with my axe and my wedge. And then once it starts moving forward, I am going to retreat while watching the tree back to my desired location. But first things first, before we actually start doing any cutting, my plan is valid. I have all parts thought of. If anything changes along the way, we'll talk about it. But for right now, I have to clean up and brush out all the stuff down around the tree so I can get my retreat path cleaned up and have room to work down here. So we'll just go ahead and do that next. All right, let's make my face cut. Again, we're gonna see here, snugged up next to the tree, good balance, easy going, saw next to my body, so I'm not having to hold its entirety of weight. I'm gonna look down my sight, pull the trigger, get locked in the kerf, get comfortable, and then I can poke my head out the front here and see how much I'm driving down. Remember, I'm gonna try to open up about 10 inches. Let's try it out. All right, top cut's done. Let's take a look at the bottom cut here. And I'll be able to see as I come around the bottom cut because I can see through the window of the kerf. Throw our face notch off to the side to analyze in just a little bit here. All right, let's take a little look-ski at that. So that is a pretty looking face wedge there. And we'll analyze it when we're all done. But pointed at the target, opened up, no bypass on the top or the bottom. nice clean cuts. Punch a hole in this thing. Okay. We are 90% of the way cut through this tree. I got my face cut. I got about an inch worth of hinge here, an inch worth of hinge here, and an inch worth of hinge on the back. I'm going to take my favorite wedge, set it into this kerf. All right, we're driven in here, point in the direction of the fell. Now, I'm 90% of the way cut through this tree, and it's not going anywhere. Yeah, it's a windy day, but I got holding wood in the back. I got a hinge on the front. Everything's set up. I could sit here all day and wait until the coast is clear. So before we ever drop a tree, we just want to make sure that everybody knows what we're up to. So I'm just going to yell really quick and see if anybody responds. Stay clear, tree felling! Stay clear, tree felling! I'm in the middle of the woods, so nobody's going to respond. But if there were somebody nearby, a pedestrian or something like that, hopefully they would shout back. Maybe they're up over a hill. They heard the call, but they don't necessarily see the work. Chainsaws also attract people. They hear the noise, they're fascinated by them, and they come a little bit closer. So that's always problematic too. So before the wind picks back up here, I'm going to make my release cut by cutting just slightly below the stump. Again, if you haven't watched the previous video into what it is that I'm talking about and why, please do so in the tree felling plan. So we're all set up. We got our mechanical advantage, plenty of it, and we're ready to make our release and go through our escape. I'm going to move this and see if we can make it look a little bit more dramatic. All right, we're gonna hold clear, watching the canopy. Did touch that oak a little bit. Some branches moving, watching the rest of the canopies. Making sure nothing else is gonna fall out. Once everything stops moving, we'll give her the all clear. All right, very good. All clear. Let's go in and take a look. All right. First thing we notice here is I missed. I am off by about 5 feet, maybe 4 feet or so. So that's unfortunate. That's not going to make for a very good video. But also, things happen. So let's see if I can determine why I was off. Let's do a little stump reading here. So let's see if I can bring you down and show you all the magic all at once here. There we go. Now you can see the target off in the distance, and you can see the direction that I was felling was right at it. So the tree must have had a little bit harder lean to the left than I was able to calculate, and that's okay. So we gave ourselves a little margin of error. I did not hit the pile on the left. I did not hit the tree on the right. I did just barely tap this oak canopy here, knock some dead wood out of it. So you're welcome, I guess. But let's do a little stump reading. So obviously the tree moved a little bit to the left more than I would have wanted it to, and that's okay. How do we do cutting? All right, so I wanted about 10 inches of open face. You can see this is not a circle. So unfortunately, I had to cut further into the tree than I generally like, which is all right, but just something to be aware of. If you need 10 inches and I wanted it to fell it this way, I was going to have to go in that far. I got 8 here, so yeah, I bet that's about 10. Let's take the old tape measure here. I've got actually 12 inches. Oh, let me see. Sorry, this is in decimal. So 0.9 feet, pretty close. So I'm less than 12 inches, closer to about 10 inches. So I opened up my face just the way that I wanted to. I wanted about an inch, inch point one of hinge width here. So over here I got just a little under an inch on that side, and exactly an inch over here. So pretty close to being parallel. I wanted an inch. I made it a little thinner over here than I had wanted to by just a fraction, a very small fraction of an inch. You can see by the kerf marks here that I was able to plunge in or bore in and cleaned out this section here, brought the saw out and around, so I was able to open up a hole for my wedge, and then left this trigger wood on the back. Let's see if you can see that. There we go. All right. So this little trigger wood was left on the back wholly intact. Let's take a little look at that. Nice little chunk. I got about 1.5 inches of trigger. So when I was talking earlier and this thing was setting up in the wind, I had 1 inch worth of hinge on the front. I had 1 inch in the back of the solid wood holding it. So wind was just pushing it back and forth, but plenty of wood to hold this tree upright until I was able to get my all clears and finish removing. I cut just slightly lower than my wedge so I wouldn't damage my wedge. The tree didn't go anywhere, which told me that the wind was pushing it enough that it didn't want to move forward, even though it was the weight of it was over center. The force was pushing it back. Gave it a few love taps. It was pretty easy to push forward with this wedge, and I didn't need all 70 inches of movement, but as soon as it started moving, I was able to take my retreat path back to my little safety tree, and the tree did fall and pretty close to where that I wanted it to. So a little bit of room for improvement here, but pretty good fell. Hey, if you like these videos and you found something interesting or learned something today, make sure you like and subscribe and continue watching the series. There's a lot of really good videos on here on how to become better. Maybe you're already skilled in tree felling or arboriculture, but it never hurts to hear another person's perspective and learn a little something along the way. So again, if you like what you're watching, like and subscribe, and keep on to the next series. See you next time.